Alright, let's start a fairly basic holster. This is going to be for this is a non-functioning replica, but it's going to be for a real, it's a Single Action Army clone. I think it's a Colt Vaquero, or Ruger Vaquero. But anyway, like I said, this is pretty obviously not functioning. But it's the exact same size and shape as the gun that I'm trying to make this holster for. It fits a holster for that gun perfectly. So I'll use it to shape this one. But this is going to be a left-handed cross-draw holster. It's going to sit on the right hip. It's for somebody who has had a stroke and used to be right-handed and has his belt set up for things being on his right side. But now he has to use his left. And so he wanted a cross-draw holster that he can draw with his left, but still wear on his right like he's used to. Not sure how often it's going to come up that somebody who's had a stroke wants a holster. But this is somebody I've known for a long time, so I'll make one for him. A little bit there needs to be rounded up. Okay. That's roughly cut. And this is 8-ounce leather, 8 to 9, and about a 4 to 5 lining piece. So it's going to be a nice heavy holster. We need one more bit. And that we need a spacer piece to go on this side. And I've got a scrap here cut off from a belt or something. I just pulled out of the scrap bin. Also about 8 to 9-ounce leather. And we're just going to follow our edge here. And then give it a little bit. Enough that we can get our stitch line in there. Oop, getting a little wide. Well, that's easier to cut by a lot. Oh, not near as stiff as that other leather. We're also going to use our hole punch there in the corners. Just to make life a little easier on ourselves. I'm trying to cut those tight corners there. Okay, we're going to do a little bit of edge beveling. We're going to do a little bit of marking our stitch lines. This is going to be a very simple holster, and we're going to, like I said, do a stitch line. I am going to be lining this, so I need to do a stitch line pretty much all the way around. So I'm going to stitch along here just to stitch the lining into the top so it doesn't come loose over time. We're going to do a stitch line. Get all that untangled. Do a stitch line down this side where we're going to actually sew the holster together. going to do a stitch line across the bottom, where we're going to again sew the liner in. I am not doing one along the back here because when I fold this down from the front, I don't know if I'm going to be able to hit that line or not. It's not always right in line with it where it should be. And that's a simple matter of, this is light brown Pro dye. It's used to be Pro oil dye. Because of its oil pull-up finish tendencies. I think is where that comes from. Just in general, a very nice light brown dye. Let's give everything about 3 coats of dye real quick. One right after the other. Because when you get dye the most even is when you manage to go over it before it has a chance to dry. Unlike paint where you want to dry it between each coat. Now for this piece, the spacer piece, it's going to get dyed a really dark brown. I think this is chocolate brown I've got in this container right now. Show brown or chocolate brown are the 2 colors I generally use, depending on which I happen to have at the time, I think. And that's what I'm going to dye the edges, so that's what I'm going to dye this piece. At least along its edges. And I'm going to do that so that inside the holster, if you look inside, you see it's at least dyed. Okay, let's toss some finish on these pieces. Well, the dog provides some background noise. Right, Pepper? Okay, not entirely dry yet. Still some swirls in it, but we're going to go ahead and get some glue on it. Glue these pieces together. As usual on larger pieces, let's slop some glue on there and then use a scrap of leather to spread it out. Nice, thin, even coats are what you want. And a scraper is good for doing that. I did forget something. I need to punch a couple holes in this before I put it together. Oh well, right about there, right about there are my, I needed the holes for the hammer loop I'm going to put on this. Should have done that before I put glue on everything. Punch a couple holes real quick right there. If I was really planning ahead, I would have made sure I didn't get glue on this spot. So it doesn't glue together as strong. And I've done that in the past with just some tape right there between those. And I can peel the tape back off and keep the glue from being there. I don't need to punch the hole in the lining piece because I don't actually want the lace for the hammer loop to go to the inside of the holster. I just want it to be through the outer layer. So we'll just go ahead, start gluing all this together. Put a little bit of a bend in it so that it's not totally flat. That'll help keep us from getting too many issues later on. how sorts there a little bit. It's gonna bend up a little bit too. There we go. Okay, now that I've got the liner sewn in, let's go ahead and trim it. We're going to start off the same way I started with cutting. By punching out some holes in some places to make my life a little easier. And just take a fancy little trim knife here and start trimming. Okay, now, before I can go on to sewing this shut, I have to sew that down. Before I can sew that down, I want to finish all these edges that'll be inaccessible after it's sewn down. So, that's going to be our next step. Grab out an edge beveler, hit a few places like this where I messed this up. And of course, any place along the inside for the liner needs to be beveled. Alright, now I did not edge bevel these parts in along here because they're going to be flat against, well, this when it gets sewn together. So I don't actually want the little gap that would be there if I actually edge beveled it. But all of this across the bottom here, I need to finish up before we sew it together. And as I mentioned before, we just use this chocolate brown dye. And we'll use some gum trag and burnish the edges. Ooh, already wet. Don't be like that today, huh? So despite the fact these work like big markers, they are occasionally messy and drip bits, which is annoying. So I have to be somewhat prepared for that. That's why I have this piece of leather that I blotted on, but that doesn't always get enough of it off of there. And I've got this one. Already good to go. We're getting into this tighter curve here. That big flat one doesn't want to go. Now, I'm using gum trag on this as a kind of a personal preference. I kind of like it. I have used Toconol. It works great too. I just don't like it as well on these heavier leathers. I like it on thinner stuff and softer leathers. But any sort of burnishing compound, wax, lots of different things work for this. And I've used a lot of different ones along the years. This is just what works well for me. So we're just going to spread some of that on there and let it sort of soak in a bit. And burnish the edges. I'm going to grab my freehand groover here. Put a few little lines in where I want to do my stitch lines for this. Just want to do a nice little not necessarily a rectangle, but or even a half circle, but kind of a half oval, if that makes sense. A D shape. Now that we got that done, it's time to take this back down, sew that together, and then I can come back and glue the top piece in, and then sew it all shut. But let's sew that in now. Alright, let's see what we can do here. Gotta be careful when you're forcing something into place like that, because that's when you skip stitches. Skip stitches, of course, are a bad thing. Okay, let's go ahead and rough this up a little bit with her. Just a knife blade will do it. Just scrape it some and rough that surface up, open it up a bit. Do the same on this, especially since we've got that acrylic finish on it. And same glue we used before, barge cement. Alright, we'll drop this little fella in here. Usually best if it sticks up a little bit in the middle, because I'm planning on grinding it down some, touching that edge back up anyway. And put some glue on this side of it, and then stick all this together. Okay. As usual with contact cement, you make basically let it dry before you stick stuff together with it for the best bond. And the holster's gonna fight you a little bit on it usually, if you made it thick enough. So I'm going ahead and put these wing binder clips, giant office supply paper clip things. We'll let it sit for a little while before I go down and stitch it, just to get that glue all stuck together. Just getting in the way. Alright, now that the edges that's sewn together, I have to finish these edges up. And my machine left a little bit of pressure foot marks on it, so we're going to kind of just use the back of a tool to burnish those off a little bit. A lot of it will go away when I do the wet shaping for the holster. Anyway, let's go ahead and bevel this edge off in a couple places where when I sanded it even, I got rid of some of the beveling so that we can round this edge out real nice. And of course, more of the same. Gotta re-dye it. Because as you can see, some of the dye went away when I sanded it. Throw some gum trag on it. Slick it down. Now, this is obviously too stiff to force a firearm into at the moment because it's, 12 ounces of leather. So that's where wet forming comes in. We'll have to actually soak this holster for a few minutes. I'll come back, it'll be a lot darker color. And then we'll be able to put this firearm in here, or this replica non-functioning, not firearm in this case, and get it shaped to the real firearm. Okay, now that it's soaked in water for a few minutes, it's a lot more flexible. And we can open it up real easy and shape it to the particular firearm. Like I said, in this case, the non-functioning replica of a firearm. Now, wet leather always seems to grab quite a bit on holsters. So you actually want it a little sticky. Not quite a smooth draw when it's wet, and you'll usually be okay when it's dry. There are some things like the ejector on single action revolvers that you gotta watch out for a little bit and make sure you really kind of drag them out and give enough of a channel for that to be drawn out. Otherwise, it winds up, when the leather dries, it just grabs in tight. And if you push in around that, you're going to make it to where, yeah, it'll really stick in the holster. Alright, here's a nice scrap of veg tan leather that's been milled so it's softer. And it's about 4 or 5 ounces. We'll go ahead and use that for our hammer loop. That should work just fine. Let's see. Let's just use scissors for this. That's more than enough. So, for our hammer loop, I like to go 3/4 of an inch to an inch wide, and then taper a little bit. Get the tapers in there the way I like them. Alright, and then we're just going to round out this end. So we just have, like I said, kind of a wide spot, about 3/4 inch wide. All this tapers down. Take off a little bit of oddities there. And then I just take a 1-inch bag punch. Punch a slot in it. That's really all there is to it. That's a hammer loop. Put a jumbo lacing needle on the end of it. And we will slide it down through between these two holes that I put in the back here. Obviously, this is best done also while the leather's wet, so that it's flexible enough to be able to do this. And later, it's gonna dry just solid in there, and keep that from moving around at all. Alright, put it in, loop it over. Drag it down almost snug. You should be able to pop it off with your thumb, but it doesn't come off on its own really. And it definitely doesn't let the gun leave the holster. Leave a little bit there to grab onto in case it needs adjustment. Alright, so this has a couple days worth of drying to do. And then it'll be ready to take to the customer.